So we're going to jump right in here with starting to create a custom model game. And as I recall, we were going to start with C4 E5. Now we're going to have four of these to do, but the first one, the easy way to look at this, and we remember we're looking at this for 1200, 800, 1800. The easy way to do this is to just look at the things that are most likely. Oh, another thing. So when looking at the engine, so the engine evaluations are going to be really important. And what I like to do is look at as many lines as it'll give me. In this case, 5. You can look at this simultaneously, so I can see what the drop off is that the computer sees in terms of eval. Also, you can get an idea of what the different options are that you have to choose from. So I really prefer to look at a lot of different lines at once, so I have the computer calculating all kinds of different stuff. So we're going to be looking up in this right-hand corner a lot. And then down here, which is looking at the likelihood of different moves and frequency. Now, for my own moves, so I'm looking for a move for white here. I don't really care about likelihood quite as much, although looking at success rates is something that's important. So, okay. And this position is pretty clear. We're choosing between G3 and Knight C3. Those are the most frequent moves played by far. They're also, if we look at sort of what strong players have played, 96% of the time, masters are playing one of these two moves. And the computer also clearly prefers these. So these are, and if you think about it, it makes sense. In this C45 position, white is claiming D5 or trying to, and black does not care. Black is like, okay, you can have D5. I'm just going to develop normally, put my central pawn forward that you did not prevent, and I'm just going to develop normal moves, and you can have D5. So this clamp on D5, white should really go for this. Hence for Knight C3 and G2 and Bishop G3 to put pressure to control this square. All right, now this is a pretty big decision between Knight C3 and G3. They have actually different variations, different lines. I've decided to go with G3 for a few different reasons. One is it's doing slightly better here. Computer really doesn't care. And it's also doing slightly better here. You can see there's a slight improvement in the white's win percentage and decline in black's win percentage. So we're going to go with G3. Okay, so now we care about this and what the frequency of moves are. All right, so you can see, actually there is some difference, again, in between masters and our cohort. We should be caring about our cohort in general. You can see the most frequent move by some distance is Knight F6, but Bishop C5, Knight C6 are coming up. Because this is the first one we're doing, we're just going to go with the most frequent. Notice, though, interestingly, the computer's favorite move is C6, way down here. And if you recall, this is a move that was also favored by masters on move 1 versus our cohort. So our cohort apparently does not like C6, but the computer likes it and masters like it. I think also, yeah, C6 is the third choice here on masters. So C6 is a move we're going to be coming back to because it looks like it might be pretty good, but our cohort doesn't play it. Okay, but we're going to go with our cohort, Knight F6. And Bishop G2 is played 90% of the time. That makes a lot of sense given we just played G3. There's really no excuse not to play this eventually, so why not play it now? Okay, and now our cohort is mostly playing Bishop C5. Although here, it is important to note that C6 is the second choice. Also, again, the computer really likes C6. Back here, it has a number 1, number 2. It also likes D5, which is the third choice. Notice that D5 is the first choice for masters. So this is one we're going to have to probably get back to because it looks like a good move, these C6 and D5 plans. But we're going to start with Bishop C5 because that's what our cohort prefers. It also, because it was a significant move on move 2 instead of Knight F6, this is a very likely position that we're going to meet. Okay, so Knight C3, E3. looks like computer really prefers knight c3, which makes sense because, again, we're clamping down on d5. It's a developing move with a piece. We're not sure where these pawns go, so why commit one of them? Whereas this knight c3 is pretty much got to be played. Okay, so now, again, we're meeting this c6 theme. Not played by our cohort, played by the computer. Masters like it more. So we're going to look at that. But right now we're just going chalk. We're just going to play. Okay, computer says people like castles. They also like d6, which probably is going to be similar. Just getting the bishop out. But castle's a very natural move. Also, it doesn't look that bad. So, okay. Okay. Now we have a choice. I can see this. Okay. So the computer seems to like knight f3 a little better. Right? Not a ton better, but better. 0.3 versus 0.1. It's the second choice move for our cohort. It's the second choice move for masters. Pretty much everybody humans prefer e3. But the computer prefers knight f3. So we gotta understand why this might be so. Well, it's one thing that's clear is that e3 blunts this bishop, and knight f3 does not. And if Peter doesn't care, there might be some. I just want to look at this. Let's look at knight f3 and see what the main lines are. Looks like knight c6, d6, rookie e4, c6. Looks like most of these are pretty not particularly challenging, except maybe e4. I'm just going to look quickly at e4. So it looks like to me e4, yeah, knight g5. Everybody's playing it. It's winning. Okay. So this is the problem. So the computer thinks that white is ahead by 0.7 pawns, but the best move is bishop takes f2, and in fact, black is doing very well with bishop takes f2. Not with masters, but with our cohort. So this means it might be a good move, good position for white, but a little tricky. And I can see that. I can see sort of like you're getting back. Okay. So black's gonna get back the piece when he picks on g5 with the queen. But he's gonna lose this pawn. You can kind of see that's one nice thing about having these different lines up here on the right is you can actually mouse over it and it shows you the types of positions. So you can see this white's king is going to be a little bit uncomfortable in these lines, but black has lost the e-pawn. So white is going to have a bigger center. And it looks like a little bit better development, although he's not going to be able to castle. Okay, Peter likes it. I can see why the computer likes it. I can also see why people are shying away from this because it's definitely not easy. All right, and so the alternative is this move, e3. Okay, computer actually thinks that this is flat out equal on c6, and that is in fact the most popular move. Masters don't like it as much, which is interesting because the masters usually like c6 better, and the computer loves it. What do these positions look like? Okay, so I'm just going to mouse over this, and I can see in the right what they look like. Okay, and it's kind of flipping around. It's analyzing while I'm looking, so sometimes it's going to flip around. Looks like there's going to be some kind of isolated d-pawn position. And kind of see what the computer thinks is going to happen. I can see why it thinks that this is kind of equal. And now I have to make a decision about what I prefer. And the fact is that I personally prefer kind of dynamic positions where there's a lot going on, competing plans. This isolated d-pawn to me looks a little bit sedate. I would say that white, usually with an isolated d-pawn, you're trying to attack, but I don't know if this knight on e2 is a great fit for that. And this bishop is pointing, not pointing at black's king, but pointing at the queen side. I don't know. I'm not loving this. Computer isn't loving this. So I think I'm going to choose knight f3. Which means I'm going to have to deal with this e4 idea. But maybe not in this line, because the number one move is d6. Which is interesting. Masters are playing c6, knight c6 most of the time. Computer thinks that knight c6 is the best move, notably better than d6. Also, there's this, and we know this e4 idea is a little tricky. And then there's c6 coming up again. So c6, we're definitely going to have something against c6. We're going to have to look at that later with one of our 4 lines, but maybe not here because it's pretty far down the list for our cohort. d6 is the number one move. So here we got to, like, I got to look, because d6, I have a couple different thoughts about this. First is that knight c6 is a developing move. Gets a piece out. Computer likes it far more. Look at this, 0.6 versus 0.2. Although I do note that it has d6 coming up later. Why? Why does it think that this if d6 is coming up later, why is knight c6 so better? It's much better. Okay, so we'll see in this d6 line, it actually is looking at just playing an immediate d4. Playing something like this. And I can, it does move around sometimes, it's a little annoying, but when I'm trying to examine lines this way. But point is it thinks after d4 and white gets in, and pretty much I think black has to take, then white is going to be just having a better version of the usual. Well, and clearly knight c6 prevents the same kind of d4 move because he covers. Okay, so that's why. Can't play d4. Looks like we're playing d4 anyway, but later with prep after you play e3 or something. So I think I'm going to go with knight c6 here, even though it's not as popular, because we're going to play this d4 idea anyway. And knight c6 is clearly defers that. It makes me do some more preparation. Okay. So let's see. And actually, quickly, before I move on, there was another, I wanted to make sure I looked at rook e8, because rook e8 defends this pawn this way. It's a pretty common idea. Also, one disadvantage of knight c6 is that it prevents black from playing c6 with a pawn, which was coming up a lot. So let's just look at rook e8. Oh, goodness. Okay, so rook e8, even though it's pretty popular, looks like it's pretty bad. So you can play d4, which, maybe we would do because we're playing against d6. It's a very common plan. It looks like it's way worse than knight takes e5. Knight takes e5. Let's just look at this. So the clear idea is on rook takes e5, you fork. So something like this. And then you get your piece back. And apparently this is like amazing for white, because I can see why this is pretty good. Like black has just developed his rook and knight. His rook's going to have to deal with this rook. It's not particularly well placed in the middle of the board. It's going to get hit by this bishop. The queen's beautiful. The knight and bishop, everybody is hitting d5. So this black's going to be stuck with a worse center pawn for like ever. Okay, all right. I can see why this is good for white. Okay, and if the other idea after this is what looks like bishop takes f2 check, which we're kind of looking at in that other line too. Okay, so rook e8. All right, I can kind of see why this is going to be good for white. It looks like, black's losing a tempo. You just play an e4 immediately. You certainly can. You also play rook, move the rook over. Okay, so you're going to get, white is going to get e4 in. There's just, black can't play d5 yet. So this is, he's just going to get his king kind of artificially castled with rook here and then king here. Okay, so this looks, I can see why this is also good. So I can see why rook e8 is a bad move. Now this is, so I'm going to do something here. I'm going to delete this because we just want to have a single line. That's the goal here. We're going to memorize the single game, and it's going to have knight c6 because knight c6, it looks like knight takes e5 isn't quite as good. I can see why it's not as good because in this position, it looks like the knight is, you'd rather have a knight here than a rook. It's interesting. I'll just take it for granted that this doesn't work as well. We don't, of course, don't have to play it. But knight c6, it's not as good to take this pawn. And okay, but I want to make a note. So I'm gonna go down here. I'm gonna say I don't even know if I need to call out d6 but I do want to say rook e8 because we want to play d4 anyway, and that's going to come up in the game. That looked like. Knight takes e5. That's good. Okay, so that's a note. I'm not going to include this in the game. I'm probably not going to include another game with rook e8 because it looks like just straight up knight takes e5 is all you need to know. But I do want to make a note so that when I'm going through this game later, I know what to do on rook e8. All right, but on this move, knight c6, we're going to go with castles. Okay, so castles, and then what? Looks like d6. Okay, so this makes some sense. I'm guessing on rook e8, you're not. Rook e8 kind of likes rook e8, but in both of these, in all of these lines, it has e3. Rook e8, e3, d6, e3. d6 is by far the most common move. It makes sense. You're getting the bishop out. You're defending this pawn, which apparently white can take sometimes. So, all right. So let's just go with that. All right. E3, A3. Okay, let's go with E3. This looks like computer clearly favors it. Also, D4 was the plan before, and this other line makes sense with the bishop on C5. You're going to try to get D4 in if you can. It looks like you can. I think that this E4 move, which is the only way I see if you play E3 to prevent D4 coming up, by being able to take down Poisson on D3. E4 looks like it just doesn't work because you play knight g5 and you're attacking it with like 3 pieces. This knight, that knight, this bishop. It's only defended once, so he just can't defend it. So I'm going to go with e3. Computer likes it. It makes sense to me trying to get d4 in. All right. Okay, so now we see a real division. Look at this. Computer likes rook e8, and bishop f5 is doing pretty well. People are playing bishop g4, not bishop f5 is way down here. Bishop b6 is a move the computer likes. It's nowhere. It's like way down here. It's doing super well. Okay, what a master's play here. a6. Okay, I think this is a good spot to stop this particular video. I'm going to pick this up later because there's going to be a serious decision here about what to play next. So I'll see you in the next video.